Here is some stuff I did. Put some bits and bobs on the MiG. This is something that it's got multiple cuts in it. It's a convex shape. And so you have to form it and hold those pieces together. I formed it by using some of these roundish tools and got it to look pretty good. And then I put little tabs of just typing paper over the seams from the underside, and then that made a pretty good shape. And then this goes in a place underneath the fuselage. I put a bunch of various things on the fuselage. I'll show you. This, I think, is some kind of a hatch and a hinge, which I assume would like fold out like this. So I'm assuming, I don't know, it should go with that piece forward. So that's what I'm doing. You can see where it's supposed to go, and I have removed some of the aluminium with my X-Acto blade and put on a fair amount of glue here and just glue this little guy in place. And it actually doesn't look so bad once it's dry. Looks pretty good. Um, but I didn't show making any of these other little protuberances because they were all pretty self-explanatory. That was the most difficult one to actually fold and add. But all I'm going to do is put this in and sort of push it down and hold it. And when you do that, it holds in place pretty well, and you end up with this round little piece on the bottom. So now what I want to do is show you all these little extra pieces I put on there on the fuselage. That is going to be for some kind of a big pitot tube. Those are a couple of little scoopy looking things that go on the front. There's some kind of a fin. There's one on either side, one there and one there. They're kind of angled down as best I can tell on the real pictures of the airplane. Then there's some scoops back here, as well as some actuating things that go over some actuators, I suspect. There's some kind of a scoop. It's one of those on each side. And there's lots of little things on this airplane. See, there's the other side. There's lots of little things that stick out. And again, because I don't know the airplane, I'm confused where some of this stuff goes. And there's that round piece I just put on. And then there's this thing that sits underneath and has these two little fins that protrude out. And there's that piece that I just put on to show you. So these are all pieces that add character. And they were very hard to mold, to roll, because the paper's thick and they're not beautiful. At some point, I'm going to take a piece of wire, cut it the right size, and stick it in there for that big long pitot tube that sticks out the front. That's kind of seems to me a real characteristic of this airplane. Lots of the pictures have it on there. I like the look of it. I like that back, the turtle deck. I like the green. I like the raked fin. It's kind of cool. But all those little extra pieces, ouch, they're hard to put on and they're hard to shape. And they end up looking crumpled. And this is definitely going to be a 5-footer when it's done. And you'll see what happens with the wings. So, wings. These are very easy to cut out, and I cut out a part there for the landing gear well. I'm going to show you how I make that. You can see it's creased, and on the trailing edge there's a tab that's creased and folded over, and all we're going to do is glue those down like that, give contact, and that'll be fine, and then that will form a wheel well. And the wheel well is kind of ingenious. It's pretty self-explanatory as you cut it out, but what it is a bunch of pieces that are folded. And you can see these tabs are on there, and you're making a box. So of course it starts out flat, but you start folding these pieces, and it kind of makes sense where this little box is made, because you're going to put that underneath the wing skin. And so I folded some pieces up, you can see, and then there's tabs that go out, and those are going to be sandwiched and glued underneath the wing skin on the underside of the upper surface of the upper skin. That piece there fits underneath, with the tab fits underneath to give you a place to glue that, to give a nice vertical piece on there. Because you can see that's where the oleo strut's going to go up, that little circle is. So at first I started by gluing that little piece. And so I put some glue along that tab, and then I just slide it right along, and it goes underneath and glues to the that surface of the underneath. See, it just snaps kind of in place like that. And then I just take some time with some tweezers, and setting it on the bench and pushing on it to make sure I get a good glue joint there. And that's forming one part of your box there, and the other parts all sort of come together pretty easily. And you can see it's going to form a shallow area, and then the printed part on that on the piece is going to make it look like it's a complicated wheel well. Again, it's a very simplified model apparently, but it looks pretty good once it's in. I gotta say, you can see it's kind of everything's at right angles. You try to put it as best you can, and I'm going to now glue that in place, and we'll see how it fits. But there it is. And like I said, actually, once it's in there, it looks pretty convincing. So to put one of these things in, and this is pretty common for World War II or later era airplanes, how they do this. You glue those tabs, put glue on them all the way around the outside, and then you slide them underneath the piece where they're going to sit. And you line things up. In this case, it's hard to tell on the video, but you line it up along the root edge and also along one of those front long parts. And then you also make sure the little circle, which is where the oleo strut's going to go, make sure that shows up where it's supposed to, which is in that base area, sloping away from the wing root. Here I'm just tapping those tabs to make sure they're tight. And now I'm looking at this, I'm making sure it looks okay, and there they are. Both of them are done, and that looks pretty good. It also gives a little form to the wing, which is nice, because the wings are basically look like razors. They're very flat. There's nothing to them. Now, here's where the fun begins. This is why I had the sound effect in the beginning. Number one, that little mark that was printed, that's wrong. That's not where it goes. I had to make my own where a spar is going to go, because if I use that as the spar location, none of this made sense. So there's two root ribs and there's a spar. The top one is the spar right there, and then these are two root ribs. These are going to go up against, as best I can tell, up against the side of the fuselage, and there's a left and a right, so you got to make sure which is which. You see I've labeled them as such and then put an arrow so I know which is forward. And those are going to go up there. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. You could put that into the root, glue it into the root of the wing itself, of the skins, and then just put them up against the fuselage. I didn't do that. So what I did was, use this as a cautionary tale. I put that spar through, and it's got a couple of notches where the ribs are going to go. I pushed this little guy all the way through, and it fits very well on my new pieces, and you can see there's notches. That one pushes through, goes to the other side, and then this one, the notch is just to the outside of the fuselage right there. And then that's where these root ribs, I figured, are going to fit here. And my plan was to glue these to the spar and to the fuselage side, and then my skin could fit over that balsa wood like on a little shelf and dry in place and look beautiful, and it'd be no seams. Let's just say, spoiler alert, it didn't quite turn out that way. So I'm not sure, so whatever I'm doing here, don't follow what I'm doing, because it didn't work very well. Anyway, I put the root rib on there, and now I'm adding some glue along its back side that's going to touch up against the fuselage, and then I'm going to push that in place up against the fuselage. And you can see that, well, part of this is I'm trying to take pictures, and I don't have good depth perception with the video. But I'm putting this on here, and I'm trying to match it up against where the white part is, where that root is supposed to go. And I'm just kind of squeezing it carefully, trying to make sure I don't have a lot of glue anywhere, and just basically putting that thing down so that you've got this base on which I hoped you'd put on that the skin over that. So there it is, and it looks fine. Now, put that one on, glued it all the way up to the edge, everything's fine. I put the other side on off camera, it's ready to go. Now, the idea was to now take this spar, because the wings won't fit where that spar is, because it's too long for the wings, but you're supposed to bend this, I think, at an angle. Crack it and bend it down. And so what I did was, instead of just cracking it, I ended up making a little triangular piece of balsa to give it strength. So this was guessing by gosh, but also checking to see how the wing would look when I put it up against there in terms of angle. So I made this triangle, and I made an identical one for the other side. And I started by gluing this right to the middle of the root plate there and up against the spar. And what that does is form an angle so that I can crack that spar and just glue it up against that triangular angle, and I'll have the right angle. So here I'm adding a little bit of zip kicker and making sure it's in place. And then you can see I crack this. Once that dries, I crack that just like that. And now I'll put some glue and just attach it like so. And now I have my angles out and it's strong. It's not going anywhere. So I put some super glue in there and I'm holding it in place. Tried to make sure it's straight, and I'm not going to have anhedral or extra dihedral or anything like that, at least in theory. And hold that in place. I'm right now eyeballing it to see if it's straight. It turns out it wasn't that straight, but anyway, my plan was, here you go. I now have this thing coming out, and I can slide this wing skin on here like this. Gives it some strength, and then I can just push it up against the fuselage and it would fit up there. At least that was the idea, and it was kind of going okay. But when I tried to actually glue it in place and put it up against that rib plate, it didn't work. And what I have now are wings in here that are pretty horrendous. It's the only way I can describe it. Here they are, and you can see, they're on. The wings are on, and they're strong. But my gosh, there's huge gaps at the wing root, and it was a struggle to get those skins on there. They're relatively strong. They have a good shape to them essentially, and you can see there's where the spar is, but it doesn't show through badly. But look at these gaps in there. Oh my gosh! So I got to figure out what to do. There's huge gaps and a lot of glue. I had to put super glue underneath so that I could make them stronger. It's not pretty, people. And so I am going to need to do some plastic surgery on this. And look at the underside. Just globs of glue, and not my finest hour at all. But it was just a mess to get it together. So I'm cutting my line and just going for it at this point. It's going to be a 5-footer, and I think that's just the way it's going to be. But wings are on, and so the next thing I'll do is put in some various things and attachment points and sort of hope for the best. But ouch.